child protective services, and they won't give them back to their loving families because they're making money.
This is a legal system that you're going into. And if you don't know the rules, you will be chewed up and spit out.
If I could say anything to a mother who just got their children detained, you're in a crisis. Yeah. Life feels like it's over. The most important thing is regaining custody of your children.
The child welfare system at its core is designed to protect children who need protection, okay? And that's key, is who need protection.
So social workers, out of fear, will remove more children rather than only remove those children that truly need to be removed.
It's okay. It's okay.
This isn't someone stole your car. Someone broke into your house. This someone took your child, your flesh and blood.
It doesn't say on this order that it was not proven. It says untrue. True. I immediately knew that, okay, well, this ain't over.
Were there signs there? Were there no signs? Did I miss them? Did I catch them? At this point, I honestly don't know.
Families only get a finite amount of time to reunify.
I came into this field to help families, not destroy them.
The difference between the criminal system and the child welfare system is substantial. You have more rights as a criminal than you do as a parent.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Fight With Me Fridays, fighting CPS and coping with trauma and focusing on self-care. So today, without further ado, we're not going to have a guest, but we are going to talk about today the signs of a psychological breakdown. How do I identify the signs? How to deal with those signs? Last Friday, I was not in a very good place. I'm not in the best place today. I found out last night that the person that I have been involved with for about 2 years now has been extremely unfaithful and has been lying to me. And, you know, when someone is disingenuous meaning, by definition, you are letting on, like you're leading somebody on to believe that you know less than you actually do. You're giving less information to someone than you should about a current, you know, or whatever situation. So that was really upsetting to hear. I confronted him about it. It escalated, of course. But to circle back to last Friday, and I know this is early for you guys. It's 6 in the morning in California. It's 9 in the morning where I am. So I don't get as many comments as I normally do, but guys, feel free to talk to me. You know, if anybody wants to come onto the show today, you're more than welcome to. My producer will send you a link. You know, so keep that in mind if you would like to do so. So last week, I might take the show down actually, but you know, I've said in the past, I am dealing with my own, you know, mental ailments, especially surrounding the case. And although on the shows, most of the time I'm calm, cool, and collected, well, maybe not. My language is usually colorful. I can't help but just be enthusiastic about the things that I care about. But, you know, for the most part, you know, I've had comments from viewers who follow the show that, you know, oh, you're so articulate and like, you're so, I don't know how you get through this. Like, you're just so cool about it. Guys, that's not true. That's not true. When I lay my head down at night alone, there are nights, and it kind of like happens in a cycle. There are nights where I scream and I cry myself to sleep. You know, my home is my only safe place that I have. It's the only thing that I have in this fucking world. The only thing. I have nothing else. Literally, I have nothing else but my home. And when my safe place is threatened, it really triggers something deep inside of me. So when I was a child, I had 7 brothers, and later on in life, I had 2 sisters. I didn't have my first sister until I was 12. So, you know, that was really important to me. And then I found out something happened to her, and like that's a story for another day. But growing up, my mom, like I mostly, since a very young age, probably 5 or 6, I started taking care of my family. My mom had a severe mental disorder, which she still has. She'll never admit to it. She'll never seek help, which is really sad. Guys, like, if you're bleeding out in your arm right now, you're going to go see a doctor. You're going to go see a doctor because you're bleeding to death. How is it any different if you have a psychological disorder that is causing toxicity and trauma in your family and you're a parent? If you're in that situation, please seek help. If you have something against therapy, oh, well, these therapists, they don't know me, blah, blah, blah. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. They're just billing these bullshit hours. You know, like I've heard all the excuses in the book. There is no excuse. If you are sick mentally, and also like a lot of times people don't realize like how mentally sick they are until it's too late. Don't let this be one of those cases. You know, and this is what this show really focuses about is, you know, dealing with those mental issues. And, you know, it's literally the same as having genetic, you know, heart disease or high blood pressure or hypertension, diabetes, you know, like there are so many cancer. There are a lot of illnesses that require immediate and constant medical attention that aren't stigmatized. Mental health disorders shouldn't be any different. Okay, so Amy, what makes her mentally ill? So my mom was, and still is, how do I say this nicely? Because I love my parents. I do. I love my parents. But I'm still dealing with so much trauma from the way that I grew up. My mother was extremely narcissistic. She was severely depressed. I don't know if I would say bipolar. And what makes my family situation so complicated is the fact that, you know, I was born in Germany. My father was in the military. They were Mormon. For fuck's sake, we didn't drink alcohol or coffee or tea, you know, for God's sake. Like, we didn't do any of that. Yet, my childhood was so toxic. Like, I felt like at times I was living in a fishbowl. Like, I was under a microscope. Like, we would walk into, like, my parents always made it a point, right? So our house is, hold on, let's see. Love oneself. A lot of time going to the hospital for mental breakdown also puts you at risk for losing your children to DCF. Yes. Okay. Love oneself. I'm going to circle back to that in a little bit. I've got some really good stuff for you guys today, specifically referring to this. And literally after this past weekend, I was this close, and I still am. I am this close to checking in somewhere, to Brightview. I might check in a Brightview. As long as I'm able to do the shows and do my schoolwork, I need to check the fuck out of planet Earth for a little bit, a couple weeks or something. It's like things are compiling, and I don't want to let it get to the point where I actually do have a psychotic break. And oftentimes, you don't recover from those. So I'll talk about that in a minute. But back to your question about my mom. So she has always been extremely narcissistic. She was severely depressed. I don't know if she was, in retrospect, she never sought help for any of these issues. I don't know if she was bipolar. But for whatever reason, and this does happen a lot, as you know, relationships between mothers and daughters, she fucking hated me. She hated me. I started taking care of my family at about 6 or 7 years old. And I never stopped until I moved out and emancipated myself at 17. And all I ever wanted was my mom's approval. And it seemed like the harder I tried to get that, the more she hated me. Especially when I hit puberty. That's when things just really got out of control. I'm not going to say that I was the best child. You know, I had to deal with a lot of things at a very young age. But, you know, one of the examples of do not disturb. Okay. I'm constantly assaulted with people on my phone wanting my time. Anyway, so yeah, she, especially when I became a teenager, she hated me. And it was so traumatizing. Like I don't remember a lot of those memories. But you know, every now and then when me and my now adult siblings, you know, because I'm the oldest daughter of 10 kids, when we get together, the first thing we talk about is the shit that we went through as children. And I've said before on my shows, like, if we were given the opportunity and the tools to do so, we probably would have killed each other. Like, that's how toxic. That is how, like think back into the biblical times. Like, you hear stories like that, like Cain and Abel. I mean, like, families can be that toxic. And to the point where you are pit against each other and you hate each other so much because there's just so much going on that, yeah, like you would go to such extreme measures because A, you don't know any better, and B, like you weren't given like a healthy environment. It's complicated. Don't read that too literally, but no, like we would get into fist fights. We would like just everything over the smallest things. I remember the cops got called to my house one day. I was already grown and moved out at this point. So my little brothers that I raised were teenagers at this point. And I'm not going to say names, but two of my little brothers, I think, so like probably 4 or 5 siblings down the line, 2 of my brothers got into a fight. And this is how toxic it is. The one brother picked up a full trash can from the kitchen and dumped it on the other brother's head. Just completely put the trash can on his head. But to give you some background, our house was not clean. Like I was put on ADD medication relatively early. I was on Ritalin at like 8. Oh, it's okay, Amy. But so I was the only person, like I would make chore charts. I would make like cleaning schedules. You know, I did as much as I could at a young age to get some kind of order in the home. And now that I'm an adult looking back on my life, you know, maybe I do have some kind of condition where I do need, and this is why being a single mom was like the best thing that ever happened to me. I was running my cleaning business, and just my cleaning business alone, this was before the other businesses started. I just had my cleaning business. I had probably 2 to 3 clients a day, every day, except for the weekends. And sometimes like I would have these big move out jobs or commercial cleans on the weekends. And I would take my kids with me sometimes if I didn't have a babysitter because they only were in daycare during the week. And, you know, for me, like things have to be, there has to be some kind of order. There has to be some kind of order, or I can't, I can't function. However, I'm not like OCD. I'm not obsessive compulsive. And like oftentimes OCD is mistaken for just being very particular. So OCD is when like, for example, I have to close the back door, open and shut 3 times, or my family's going to die. Stuff like that. That's OCD. You have to do certain things in a very specific order, or something bad is going to happen. That's my personal take on OCD. So it's not just like, oh, you're super clean, you're OCD. I'm actually not super clean. I think I'm looking at my kitchen right now. I think my mental health, has taken a toll on that. But, when I am healthy mentally, things are very much in order. But anyway, needless to say, I feel like I'm going on a tangent here. So my mom was very unhealthy. Her comfort, her addiction was food. So my parents never really had, for a long time, any kind of addiction. So later on in life, my dad started drinking again. Like, my mom converted my dad to being a Mormon, and he was like playing the part for a while. But later on, by the time I was an adult, I knew, like, hey, if I'm going to my dad's house, if I'm going to mom and dad's house, I'm going to have a drink. We're going to kick back. He's probably going to have some bourbon or something, like something special, some high-end kind of alcohol. And I would just, I would get lit. So my mom found her comfort in food. My dad made a shit ton of money, yet never invested it in his children. Never. Like, say we had a sporting event in school. Like, I was in rowing. I was a varsity rower throughout high school. I loved it. I loved it so much. And God, was I super ripped. It was amazing. Like, I've heard there's an adult crew team in my area somewhere. It's expensive, like monthly, to be a member of, but it's something that I would really like to look into once I, settle all of my affairs. But, say one of my brothers or myself, we had an event. I was, he was a Freemason. I was in like Job's Daughters. It was weird. But we would have session every couple of years, like the same session that the government has to, like, make all of their laws and stuff. We would be there in Richmond or in DC, having session with them at the same time. And we would actually get to hear these people speak. And it's like one of those organizations, strangely, that you don't really hear a lot about. It's one of those, like, I wouldn't say underground. It was like a branch of the Freemasons, but for their daughters. It was called Job's Daughters. It was weird. Like, we would read the Bible and, like, walk in squares and sing songs and, like, do rituals. Like, literally do rituals. Like, you had to, like, walk in the exact shape that you, like, it's fucking witchcraft, like, low-key. Weird, right? I was young when I was doing that. I was like maybe 12, 13. And I fell out of it, not much later. But yeah, like, if any of us children, needed something, like, we were on the volleyball team or on the crew team, or we had an event coming up, and, we needed to get a hotel or, like, pay our dues, our parents would make us feel like we were pieces of shit for possibly requiring money to do extracurricular activities that are quite, in fact, keeping us sane throughout this highly toxic childhood. Not even to mention, like, the food aspect. I was raised on a diet of cornflakes, lunch meat, cheese. What are those, like, not Wheaties, but, like, they're like the actual big biscuits. It's like a British thing. There's, like, a big square biscuit, and that's it. I can't remember what it's called. That and bread and butter and eggs. That was our entire diet for 10 kids. Back to back to back to back. All hitting puberty at the same time. All growing up at the same time. Like, we need a lot of food. Like, we need to fill our bodies. Yeah. So anyway, my mom was very depressed. And she kind of singled me out, I guess you would say. especially when I hit puberty. I couldn't wear, and I didn't even remember this. This is my siblings telling me. Like my siblings, when we get together, will tell me memories of my teenage years, which I've repressed to the point that I don't remember. I am in intensive therapy dealing with this. But I couldn't wear fucking yoga pants to school without her screaming in my face that I was some kind of slut, throwing me on the floor, trying to punch me. Like it was bad. I'm not exaggerating. I hate that I'm even saying this because, at the end of the day, I recognize now as an adult, when I had my kids, it was the best thing that ever happened to me in my life. It was the best thing that ever happened in my life. I gave them everything I could, everything. I had my times where I was on a short fuse. I was really stressed out. I would come home from my cleaning jobs sometimes and my fingertips would literally be bleeding because that's how hard I worked. Nonstop. I never got a chance to rest. But I wouldn't trade that for anything. And I never, ever, ever blamed that on my kids. That was my choice. I'm running my own business. It is a successful business at that. And I have these 3 beautiful, beautiful souls that just love me so much. Growing up, I was never, like, my brothers were kind of allowed to do whatever they wanted. And even though I took on like a parental role at a way too young of an age, my mom made it a point that I was never allowed to have friends. I was never allowed to go anywhere. I can recall very few times in my life where I was actually able to go on something like a sleepover or like a play date with a friend. I just, I stayed locked in my room most days. And a lot of times that was not by choice. However, I do still love them, and that's, I digress, but that's another issue with our foster care system is even though we do have parents that are sick and they need help, whether it's from drug addiction or mental disorders or just, whatever services this family might need, a child, and I'm not saying in any case, because I will never forget the trials of Gabriel Fernandez. If you haven't seen that, go look it up on Netflix. It's going to break your heart. He looks just like my son, Gabriel. Me and my brother, Sam, both just bawled. We were crying our eyes out watching these trials. But that is the definition of an exigent circumstance. However, in a lot of these circumstances, a child, and this is statistically proven, a child is far better off staying in their family, even if their family is sick in some way. A child is better off remaining with their family than being shoved into foster care. And that is a proven fact. I am not condoning anything, any type of parental abuse. I am not condoning that at all. Or drug use around your kids. I'm not condoning any of that. That is horrible. Do not do that around your kids. However, even in spite of those factors, a child will be better off growing up in those circumstances and learning how to deal with it and survive from it than they would be growing up in foster care. But that's not for all cases. I have heard cases where a child was placed with an amazing foster parent, and to this day, they still consider that parent like their real mom / dad. Usually it's mom. But I lost my train of thought. So back to the beginning. So my brother's wife's mom, who had her kids snatched by her ex when they were just, teeny weeny babies, I had started texting her. We would talk back and forth, when I needed mental health support. I still value her as a person. So her situation with her son and his girlfriend and her sister had crashed and burned, and she came down to stay with me for a little bit. And it's just it started it started small, like little things. I'm going through a situation with my ex where I still have to see him often, and he is extremely disingenuous with me. I get a half truth at best. And this is a person that I cared so much about. Like, he was my safe place when I was going through all this. Like, he was all that I had. Like, I really, really loved and still do love this person. And it hurts. It sucks. It fucking sucks. So, you know, I'm hearing things from friends like, oh, you know, I saw him on a date with this girl. Oh, he was out at the bar with 3 bitches drinking. Oh, really? Because he doesn't drink. That's so funny. Funny you say that. You know, so like that kind of stuff is really, really upsetting to me. So when I get triggered, you know, I guess I have abandonment issues that stem from childhood. And I think that when I get triggered, sometimes it digs up like really deeply, you know, rooted issues that stem from early in my life. And I am in therapy. I'm working through these issues, you know, but it's not something that goes away quickly. It often, you know, things that you experience as a child, they often snowball as you become an adult. And when you experience a trigger that touches something from when you were a child or a teenager, the effect of that, whatever it was being triggered, it causes extreme reactions as an adult, because you're not just dealing with that issue right then and there. You're dealing with the same issue that affected you as a child, that was similar to, if that makes sense. You know, okay, let's see what Amy says. My mom actually educated me as a child on CPS. I'm 32 now. How she knew, I don't know. So I educated my daughter, and what I knew, I've learned a lot more through these shows. Thank you so much, Amy. I really appreciate that. Yeah. So my first run-in with CPS was when I was a teenager, when I found out that something happened to my sister. I finally, after six brothers, I finally got a sister at 12 years old. And like, by this time I had already been raising my family, while my mom was sick in bed. Like, I literally, like, she had a revolver to her head one day, and I think I had to take it out of her hand. I can't remember. The memory is fuzzy, but she was going to commit suicide on her bed with all 10 of us kids in the house. Like, she was sick. She was depressed. My dad was low-key mentally and emotionally abusing her. And after 10 fucking kids and 20 plus years of marriage, you know, they never fought in front of us, which is amazing to me, because I don't have the patience to hide my tips from my kids. Like, if I have a problem with you, you're going to know. Like, you're going to know immediately. They never fought in front of me or any of us. But yeah, my mom tried to commit suicide on her own bed with my dad's revolver, and we had to take it from her. I think also one time she tried to swallow a shit ton of pills. But, you know, honestly, like, I can understand how she was feeling. It sucks. But anyway, again, I digress. So my mother-in-law-ish comes to stay with me. Her situation where she was before wasn't working out. And I was really excited. I was like, oh my God, this is somebody who understands what I'm going through. Like, she knows exactly what I'm going through. You know, fuck yeah, come stay with me bitch, move into my house for free. Like that's how excited I was. So she gets here, you know, I'm getting triggered low-key by like my tumultuous relationship with my ex. So, you know, I hear a bit of information, I go running. You know, if it's nighttime, I hear some bullshit, I put in my headphones, I go skateboarding. I love skateboarding. I'm actually quite good at it. Not to, you know, toot my own horn, but I've been skateboarding since I was probably in kindergarten. It was one of the only things I was able to do at my house as a kid. I remember taking my kids to the skate park, and like my middle son, was, and, you know, of course they had the helmets, they had like the elbow pads, knee pads, they had the wrist things, like they had everything. They had skateboards exactly measured, you know, to their height. And they learned a bit. They learned a bit about how to skateboard. But I remember, like, we're in this like skate park, and there's this huge like half pipe bowl. Like if you know what a half pipe is, like they're really high up. So it's a half pipe bowl. It's very deep. And I had Chloe, oh, I'm not supposed to say names. I had my youngest daughter kind of like, you know, not running around, but like, hey, oh my gosh, I'm at a skate park. This is so cool. You know, and had my oldest son, Gabriel, who was kind of having like a meltdown. He's my emotional baby. Oh God, what is this? So, you know, Gabriel's kind of like having anxiety. Chloe's like super excited. My youngest daughter is super excited, just like wanting to run around. And I'm like, no, Chloe, you're holding my hand. And then my middle son, in all of his gear, with his like specifically measured board. It was like, you know, it was like a regular, you know, like trick board deck. But it was probably, how many inches would I say? It was like probably yay big. This kid, okay, because I taught my kids well. This kid, I'm focusing on Chloe, holding her hand, making sure Gabe's okay. Don't have a meltdown, okay? Don't have a meltdown, my child, in the middle of a skate park. Like, we're good. Everything's good. And so here's Sammy. I turned my head for a split second. I don't even think I turned my head fully. And he's dropping in. So I taught my kids how to drop in on like a ramp and stuff like that. And so it's when like you like take the board. I don't know how to, I have a cleaning business. So like you take the board, there's a ramp, and like you mount your foot on the back and the board is up, and then you drop in, you put your front foot on the front of the board, and you just, boom, you drop in and immediately you go. He tried to drop in to this half pipe bowl. And I swear to God, like, mothers are amazing. My mother's spidey senses kicked in. I didn't even realize what he was doing. I just saw motion out of the side of my eye. And I grabbed him midair with my arm. And the skateboard just crashed at the bottom. And here's him in my arm. Here's my Sammy. I've got Chloe in my hand. Gabriel's having a pout. And I'm like, okay. Like, this was my life as a single mom. But like, I was so used to it. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. I miss that so much. So, okay, back to, I'm so sorry guys that I keep getting distracted, but no, so I have my mother-ish-in-law staying over here. And in the meantime, my friend from childhood shows up and was like, I'm going to kill myself, you know, but I came to the only person who I knew would understand and help me through this. And I'm like, okay, well, you're staying here tonight, you know, and I like, just things were already kind of stacking up to begin with. But when I told her that he was coming, you know, she was like, oh, well, I have trauma, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, well, it's my fucking house, and this is my childhood friend who wants to die. So the price of his life is worth more than your temporary fucking feelings. But by the end of the night, they kind of like, I wouldn't say ganged up against me because I don't want to play the victim, but I was definitely being highly disrespected in my house, my own safe place, to the point where, you know, the next day, like, I didn't know if she was still here. I Ubered his ass the fuck home. I was like, all right, best of luck. Okay. You can't bring that shit here. Cause by the end of the day, I was like, you want to die with your lack of problems in your life and you want to die? Bitch, go get the knife. We'll die right now. I was being sarcastic. I was like, you want to die? Fuck it. Let's die right now. You know, sometimes people need that tough love, but, yeah, I had nowhere to let out all of the shit that the situation had dredged up from within me. I had nowhere to let that out. And it was very scary. I ended up losing, like, basically all control of my emotions. And, you know, that was an eye-opener for me. So, anyway, needless to say, based on my experience last week, if you guys saw me on the show, I was not in a really great mental space. And so you know, a lot of my viewers are like, oh, you're so articulate, you handle things so well. But guys, that's not true. It's not true. I have mental issues. I have borderline personality disorder because of the abuse that I sustained in my childhood. And also, you know, my dad is probably like a sociopath. I think both of my parents are narcissists, but I hate that that's such a coin term. But my mom was definitely like severely depressed. My dad was definitely sociopathic. I remember like being so envious growing up of these normal families around me, especially families from church. Like I would just ask myself sometimes, like, God, why could I not have been born into just a normal fucking family? You know, where I could just wake up every day and eat breakfast and come home after school, you know, and just not have to be physically abused. Like, you know, why? Just why? I never understood, and I still don't. And I'm, you know, it's going to take a really long time to recover those memories that I've suppressed so deeply, and to work through just the trauma and the confusion of such a toxic childhood. But after last week, you know, I realized, first of all, I don't want to die. I never tried to, but I don't want to die. I'm simply in so much pain, and there's nowhere for that pain to go. I am in therapy. I am on medication, about to get back on my medication. And there's no shame in that. Fuck the stigma. Fuck what people think. And that's what I realized also after this past weekend. You know, my brother's not talking to me anymore. One of the brothers that I was the closest with. But you know what? They'll find out in a couple weeks. She'll stay with them for a couple weeks, or even sooner. They'll find out for themselves. You know, but to let you into my safe place, to go out of my way to make sure that you're comfortable and spend the resources that I didn't have to spend for you to just not even say anything, you know, and you have my brother texting me some sarcastic ass bullshit. That really hurt me, you know, to have to, like, when I feel like I have to defend myself in my own safe place, because I spent most of my life having to do that, like having to explain to people that, no, the things that my mom is telling you, they're not true. You know, they're exaggerated. She's only telling you one side of the story. I guess that's like a trigger point for me is, you know, in retrospect, I did spend most of my life alone. I spent most of my life alone. And that, you know, even though sometimes it's my personal hell and prison, that's also my only solace. That's my only safe place. So when I feel like that's violated, that's very upsetting for me. Because I remember in my abusive childhood growing up, and I was always the butt of the joke, like at every chance the family had. I will never probably understand this, maybe one day. But my only escape from that was to just run away to my room when I wasn't being locked up there. Like my mom, it was so bad. I never had toys growing up. I had to like borrow toys from my next door neighbor, you know, when her mom would let me borrow her stuff. And she was like mentally disabled. It was, oh God, so weird. Like saying this out loud is so weird. I remember probably around like 8 years old, I secretly, and this is like back in broadband internet. So I went downstairs in the middle of the night and went on American Girl online. You know, when I knew nobody was using the phone, they wouldn't know that I was on the internet. And I ordered a catalog. And it, you know, and I was already like kind of taking care of my family at this point. So I brought the mail in every day. You know, I was cooking meals a lot of the times. I was making sure the kids were up, going to school. I was making sure diapers were changed. The house was clean, to the best of my ability at that age. You know what I did? I had to go secretly order a catalog, a toy catalog, because my mom went out of her way to make sure I did not have any fucking toys or any friends or any freedom. like in any sense. I will never understand. I cut out the pictures from the catalog and played with that as a kid in my room. Other than that, I read a lot of books. I just read and read and read. Like I went through a Harry Potter book in one day. I think it was like Order of the Phoenix. It was one of like the really big ones. And because of that, I have tested the absolute top of my class in grammar, in both schools that I went to, in high school and in college. I guess in a sense in spite of it, it gave me some tools that are useful to me today. But again, there are still issues, and all of our trauma is unique to our own lives. It's unique to our situation. It's not a competition of like, oh, whose was worse. The things that you went through as a child. And oftentimes, if you're involved in a CPS case as an adult, it's a lot of times because there were factors in your childhood and early life that set you up for that failure, that set you up as a risk factor to the system. And a lot of it does, in fact, stem from abusive childhoods. You don't have to be a drug addict or an alcoholic to be an abusive parent. Although those are, the most common types. Abuse comes in many forms. So this past week, last Friday, when I was on the show, that was like, I was literally in the middle of an episode. So for viewers who, I talked before about borderline personality disorder. I've talked about a lot of different things. And, sometimes it's hard for people to see that I'm also human. I'm very grateful to be in a position where I can talk to you guys and do these shows and impart my wisdom and my experience with you, and hope that, maybe something I say is something that you can relate to. But I am hurting just like you guys are. I am no saint by any means. I'm dealing with a lot of things myself, mentally, environmentally, emotionally, physically. I mean, it's, none of us are okay. None of us are okay. We're not okay. And that's why I wanted to make it a point to do this Friday show, Fight With Me Fridays, cope with our trauma and work through our mental health. Because, and this was hard for me to accept at first. I read a book called You Can Thrive After Narcissistic Abuse by Melanie Tonya Evans. I had signed up for an Audible account, and it was like one of the free books that they had suggested. And I listened to it. I listened to it a couple of times. And it was a really, really good book. If you guys have been in an abusive relationship, even if you weren't in this case, in this situation, because of domestic violence, the court system alone and what they're doing to you is basically the same as being in an abusive relationship. They are stripping you of your rights, your children, your happiness, your well-being, your stability. Like they've taken that from you, just like a narcissist would do. So if you guys can, look up the book. And it's free on Audible if you sign up for the first time. And I think it's like 14 and some change a month. But at the same time, you can pick any book each month. So you get a credit. You get 1 credit, I think, or more each month. I think you get 3 credits. So you can get 3 books a month for $15. That's amazing. One of my favorite books, and I've mentioned it before, is The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. He also wrote The Art of Seduction. I read that. It was a quick read, nothing that I didn't already know. But The 48 Laws of Power is one of the most profound books I've ever read. Right now, I'm reading Common Sense and Other Works by Thomas Paine. It's a very old book. I kind of led myself up to that by reading Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. That was written in the early 1800s. So you have to understand what the literature is trying to say. You have to understand the language of that time period. But anyway, I'm a nerd. I love books. So we're getting out of time. I can't believe I've taken up so much time talking to you guys. So what I wanted to talk about today is, what are the signs of a psychotic break? What are the signs? How do you identify them? And something really amazing happened. So in the middle of all this turmoil, and I'm literally losing it. I have no safe place. I can't go to my room and cry, like that safe place has been kind of taken from me at this point. So I ended up parking. I don't even recall fully where I was, but I was just in my car, just screaming. I called a friend and I'm like, and she's, I've been working kind of with her, in her own business for about 5 years now. So she's seen all of it. She's seen everything that I've been through. And, she taught me how to be assertive. She's very carte blanche. And I like that. I've learned a lot from her. And she would say to me sometimes, I don't know how the fuck you're smiling right now. Like, I don't know. I don't know how you're functioning. I would not be smiling. But, I do my best to make the most out of each and every day. But I called her in this car the next day after Friday. It was like, yeah, it was Friday after my show. And I'm in the car. I think I'm at a parking ride. There was like a light rail, and I'm calling her on the phone, and I'm just hyperventilating. I'm like, I'm having a breakdown. Like, I couldn't even talk. I'm just screaming. I'm like, fuck. Like, I'm just, like, I'm ugly crying. I'm raging. I felt like the ground was falling from underneath my feet. So later, I talked to her for a little bit. I called out of work for that weekend for, one of the jobs that I was doing. I do some like PR marketing for these new products that, the company, the Hoffman, had launched. It's pretty cool. It's a great job and it pays really well. But I had a call out that weekend. Luckily, he was super understanding. And, later on, I still was not okay. So do you know what I did, guys? I called the Suicide Hotline. I'm going to pull up that number. And that wasn't my first choice. Here, let me see. The Suicide Hotline was not my first choice. I had looked at, like mental health crisis hotline because I needed help right then and there. My therapist had called out sick that week. Unfortunately, God, I was so looking forward to that appointment, but I was able to get into her office like within the next day. So I'm on Google. I'm looking up crisis hotlines. The first one I tried was 741-741. I said this on a show before, but I hadn't used it myself. If you're in a situation where you can't talk on the phone, but you just need to text somebody, 741-741. Text it. Text help to 741. Text anything to 741-741. And you'll be able to talk to them via text. They don't call you, but you can text them if you're in that kind of situation. But I kept reading, and I wasn't finding like I knew in a sense what I needed in that moment. And I just, I wasn't really, thank you so much. I knew kind of what I needed, but I wasn't like in the Google line of numbers. I wasn't seeing, what I actually needed in that moment. A lot of them were addiction hotlines, like substance abuse help. But that wasn't the case. So finally I came across, I had seen the Suicide Hotline. It was one of the first ones, but I bypassed it, automatically because I'm like, oh, I'm not suicidal. I'm just having a psychotic breakdown. And then I went back. I'm not finding, like, I'm having no luck. I've already texted 741, but I'm like, hey, I need to talk to someone. They're like, oh, we can't do that. We can text. But like at this point, I'm shaking. I'm like super sensitive, like the noise around me, for fuck's sake. Like, and like part of that time I was driving, and I'm like, there are certain signs that I'm recognizing now, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. I can't believe we're almost out of time. So I went back and I read it again, and the Suicide Hotline does a lot more than just suicide intervention. They help veterans. They help with suicide. but they also help with mental health and substance abuse. And because it's probably the most popular and well-founded out of all of these crisis hotlines, they have people who actually know what they're doing. So I called the Suicide Hotline. The number for the Suicide Hotline is 800-273-8255. 800-273-8255. So I'm in public. I'm with a friend at this point. And I call the hotline, call the Suicide Hotline. The 741 thing, I couldn't text. I couldn't text at that point. I was sensitive to noise. I needed to come back to reality. Like, I knew that I was spiraling, and I took the initiative for the first time in my life. Instead of letting my emotions allow me to completely lose control, I took the initiative to get the help I needed. So I called the Suicide Hotline, and I told her, hey, I'm having a psychotic breakdown right now. Like, I'm about to, I'm crashing and burning mentally. Like, I'm having a psychotic break. Please help me, cope right now. I need somebody to, I need to talk to somebody. I need to talk to a professional who knows what they're doing. And so the first thing that she did, she didn't take any of my information. I thought that she would. Oh, where are you? Where's your location? What's your name? What's your social? What's your email? No, she didn't even, for fuck's sake, I don't even know if she knew my name. So what she did was, we did 2 exercises. This took probably maybe 5 to 10 minutes, probably about 5 minutes. So the first exercise was because I'm hyperventilating, I'm shaking, I'm not okay. So she's like, okay, she's walking me through breathing. So she's like, inhale for this many seconds, and we're doing it together, as though I was in a yoga class. So she starts with a simple breathing exercise, and then she adds on, okay, now that you have this breathing down, while you're breathing, inhale, draw a box. We're going to draw a box. So inhale for 4, draw one side of the box, hold it for a few seconds, exhale for 6, draw the other side of the box. Inhale for 4, draw the box, hold it, exhale for 6, draw the other side. And she said, focus on nothing else than drawing this box. Nothing else. Draw the box in your head, close your eyes, and breathe. And I swear to God, guys, I was spiraling out of control. My safe place had been taken from me. I was ambushed by 2 people that, I highly revered in my life. And it was just really, thank you so much, Grace. So the Suicide Hotline number is right here. I'm sorry. It's right there. So that's the first thing that we did. And that helped me calm down enough to where I could really articulate. I could talk to other people, because my friend was here where I was, and her sister was coming over. So I didn't want to be bad company, but I knew in that moment I needed help. So the second exercise, she did the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 with me. And, when you're emotionally unstable for whatever reason, and you don't have to explain it to yourself or anyone else, you can work on identifying the trigger factors later. But when you are having an emotionally unbearable state, there's, it's difficult in those moments. And I can tell you this very well from experience. It's difficult in those moments to be able to do those coping skills on your own by yourself. Oftentimes I say, well, fuck the coping skills. I'm going to go drink a bottle of wine, or, I'm going to hurt myself, or, do something extra that not only puts myself in danger, but puts other people in danger as well. And that is one of the things that I have to work through. But I learned after this weekend that the Suicide Hotline does so much more than prevent suicide. If you are having a moment of weakness and you want to use a substance that you've been struggling with, or you want to hurt yourself, or you want to, you just want to find the bottom of a fucking bottle, or you're just having a mental breakdown, please guys, call the suicide hotline. She didn't even ask for my name. She didn't take any of my information. They're not going to come snatch you up and commit you somewhere. They will help you. They are trained. They know what they're doing. They will help you work through what you're dealing with in that moment right then and there. I was amazed at how well that worked. And I'm really glad that I now have that tool in my pocket, because the next time that I'm feeling that way, they are the first people that I'm going to call. Again, if you're in a situation where you can't make that phone call and talk, text 741-741. If you can't speak on the phone with somebody, you can text them. They will wait for you. You're not obligated to be on your phone constantly until they're satisfied. That's not how it works. You text them on your own time. If you can't reply right away, that's okay. They're still there. So before we end for today, I can't believe we are already out of time. Okay, so I want to talk about the warning signs of a psychotic episode. And I'll post a link to these later, but the website that I'm reading off of is exitrecovery.com. Okay, so the warning signs of impending psychosis. Psychosis is usually an episodic symptom, which means it comes and goes over time. The atypical thoughts and perceptions that occur during a psychotic episode can cause the affected person to quickly lose touch with reality. And usually when my thoughts start racing and everything in my life that is just compounding on my shoulders, I can't stop thinking about all of the reasons why I'm not going to be okay. And I can't stop those thoughts. Once they start racing, that's the beginning. That's when I seek out, something like alcohol or self-harming sometimes, or, I'm not perfect. I have issues. Or I rage. That's another thing. I will rage at the people that are close to me. But it's, most oftentimes it's the person who has hurt me in some way. Although we're grown, we are adults, there's no excuse for that. We need to do better. So, but even though psychosis may seem to come on fast, that's almost never the case. And I'm learning this now. Usually a person's thoughts and perceptions change in gradual, non-specific ways that can be difficult to register at first. Given that a person who's on the path to psychosis can't make sense of what's happening, having a family members or close friends who can take notice is especially important. I'm reading this on the fly. I kind of disagree with that, because a lot of times your family members are really toxic. They can be very toxic. Just take that with a grain of salt. Tread that lane carefully, because sometimes your family members are the ones who hurt you the most deeply. Given that a person who's on the path to psychosis can't make sense of what's happening, having family members and close friends who can take notice is especially important. Early non-specific changes before psychosis often include difficulty staying focused or thinking clearly, abnormal struggles with school or at work. That's one sign that I have. Usually when I'm driving, I'm like, I don't want to be driving. I just want to teleport to the destination. I can't deal with the braking and the stoplights. And I'm like, can I just fucking get there already? And then when axle drivers on the road, oh God, that's how I know when I'm spiraling is when that affects me that deeply. Or when, I'm trying to reach out for help to somebody and they're asking all these questions, and in my state of mind, I can't talk to you. I can't answer your questions. I need you to tell me a magic answer somehow. Just tell me that I'm going to fucking live through this. Tell me I'm going to be okay, because all the logic in my brain is telling me otherwise. I have a million reasons why my life is never going to be okay. So please give me one fucking logical reason right now that it actually might be fucking okay. That's just an example. So another symptom is feeling inexplicably off, sad, or worried. I will withdraw socially sometimes. That is one of the earliest signs is when I feel I could be in a room full of people who all love me and just want to be talking to me, and I feel like I'm suffocating. I feel like inside I'm screaming at the top of my lungs. I feel like I don't belong. You know, last night, when I went to a public space to do my schoolwork, one of the employees at the hotel that I'm close with, and it's a really nice hotel, you know, she was like, "Oh, you're my idol. I want to have my skin like yours. You're my sister." And she's Filipino. So for someone like her to say something like that to me, like, that's a big deal. Like, people, you know, like, in their culture, they don't just throw that term around lightly. And, you know, she's just like singing all kinds of praises about me, asking about my skincare regimen, asking for my advice. And inside, I'm like, oh my God, do you not realize that I'm a piece of shit? Like, do you not understand how much I hate myself? You know, it was really hard to hear her give me such high compliments. But, you know, like, I swallowed it down, I smiled, you know, I screenshotted and sent her all the products that she needs to use. I explained to her why, hun, you can't put Vaseline on your face and be surprised that you're getting acne. It's petroleum jelly that's clogging your pores, made in a shitty factory, like, you know. So I helped her in that sense. And she's like, "Oh, you're so beautiful. Every time you come here, you're just so beautiful." And, you know, she had never called me her sister like that before, the way she did. And I don't know why, but I felt like a fraud. Not because I don't care about her. Of course I love her. I'm not used to that. I'm not used to positivity or love. Like, I don't know how to accept it. So yeah, that was, you know, that was difficult. I wanted to go hide in a corner and throw a blanket over my body in fetal position. Like, that's how I felt in that moment. Like, I just wanted to curl up and die. Like, how could you say these good things about me? Like, that's, you know. So, feeling inexplicably off, sad or worried. Decreased motivation and depressed mood. That's another one. Unusual withdrawal from family and friends. Spending an increased amount of time alone. And disinterest in self-care or personal hygiene. It's also common for people to have trouble sleeping, processing stress, and controlling or expressing their emotions leading up to a psychotic episode. Some people experience strong, inappropriate emotions, while others seem to have no feelings at all. Other early warning signs are more like the actual symptoms of a psychotic episode, but milder and more subtle. Also referred to as attenuated psychotic symptoms, these changes include suspiciousness or uneasiness with others, odd beliefs, associations, or magical thinking, unusual or frightening perceptual experiences, hearing, seeing, or feeling things that don't exist, and speaking in a tangential or hard to follow way. Whereas the nonspecific changes before psychosis may be a temporary reaction to stress or symptoms of a totally different mental health issue, attenuated psychotic symptoms indicate a high risk of impending psychosis. So, benefits of timely diagnosis and care. Research shows that many Americans who experience psychosis for the first time have clear and persistent symptoms for longer than a year before they receive a diagnosis. Yet, it's prompt diagnosis and care that typically leads to the best outcomes. Knowing how to spot the early signs of psychosis is the first critical step in reducing the average duration of untreated psychosis. And guys, like, if you refuse to get mental help, like if you're going through a CPS case, you need professional help. Like, you had your flesh and blood ripped away from you. That is one of the most traumatic things I believe that any human being can go through. Worse than death of yourself and your kids, because at least in that case you guys have closure. Like, this is horrible, and chances are you're going to need professional help to get through it. So this is especially important for those, and like I was saying, so what I was getting at is that if you allow yourself to get to this point, a lot of times when you have psychotic breaks, when you reach the point of psychosis, it physically changes the synapses in your brain, the chemicals that are being produced, the neural pathways that are being followed in the future. You are physically changing the way that your brain works and not for the better. And there are many cases where people have reached such an extreme state of a mental breakdown that they mentally never recover. You're permanently disabled for the rest of your life. So please, guys, this is important. So knowing how to spot the early signs of psychosis is the first critical step in reducing the average duration of untreated psychosis. This is especially important for those whose families have a history of schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and any other psychiatric disorder. And then they talk about their team at Exis Recovery. So we are past time today, but I really want to make it a point to impart all of you with the information that I can give. So let's talk about having a nervous breakdown. What is a nervous breakdown? And this is courtesy of bridgestorerecovery.com. So a nervous breakdown. The term nervous breakdown refers to a range of mental health crises related to stress and that cause a person to be unable to function normally. While this is not a specific mental health diagnosis, nervous breakdown is a real and serious situation that can have profound effects on the person experiencing it. The stress that causes a nervous breakdown may differ from one individual to the next, but the commonality is that the person is not coping well with the stress in their lives. A nervous breakdown should be taken seriously and should lead to a consultation with a mental health professional. Getting treated in a residential setting with therapy, medical care, and group support is a good start to better lifelong self-care that will reduce the risk that a person will have another nervous breakdown. A mental health crisis triggered by stress may come in several forms, but they are all similar in that they begin with stress and poor coping mechanisms for stress, which can result in a decrease of functioning in many areas of life. So the symptoms and diagnosis of a nervous breakdown. Regardless of factors that make a nervous breakdown different from one person to the next, there are some common signs and symptoms. The signs are related to having a lot of stress and losing the ability to function or complete normal tasks and activities. These symptoms can be emotional, behavioral, and physical, and they include the following: feelings of depression or anxiety that are new or more overwhelming than before, feeling overwhelmed, shutting down and being unable to participate in normal activities, missing appointments, work, school, and other responsibilities, trouble thinking, concentrating, making decisions, or getting tasks done, being socially isolated and withdrawn, experiencing mood swings that may be extreme, decreased self-care like hygiene or personal appearance, changes in sleeping habits, changes in eating habits causing weight loss or weight gain, extreme fatigue and lethargy or apathy, unexplained pains or gastrointestinal distress, getting sick more often or worse than usual. Guys, I've had every single one of these symptoms. I'm going through this right now. Honestly, if I can get my affairs in order, I am not against checking in somewhere for a little bit. It would hurt my case extremely. But if that is the difference between life, death, or permanent dysfunction mentally, I'm willing to take that risk. But if I do that, I'm going to make sure all of my affairs are in order, my dog is taken care of, my rent is paid for a couple months. I want to make sure that I can still do the show, I can still do my schoolwork. You know, if they can't meet those conditions, then I can't do that. But I would love to take advantage, assuming that they're not corrupt and just looking to get your insurance money. Because I'll explain that another day. The dark side of the psychiatric side of, the medical field. A lot of people are often abused and taken advantage of. And there's, again, just like the CPS issues, there's a lot of money to be had. And that is a lot of times taken advantage of. So, do your homework, consider it carefully, make sure it is the best decision for you. But if I could take advantage of, being intensely evaluated and monitored by, a licensed and adequate professional so that they can look at me and say, okay, your kids were snatched by a fucking rapist. I understand, like, you're in so much pain, you want to die, you had a shitty childhood. However, you're almost 30. You're almost 30 years old. This is what you need to do. These are your issues. Do a CAT scan for fuck's sake. A lot of times, like, our disorders will show up on a brain scan, but a lot of people, don't do it. It's so expensive. There are avenues to get help, to get the help that you need to be able to live your best life. And if it's a matter of checking yourself in somewhere like this, or falling victim to substance abuse, self-harm, or suicide, I'm going to pick this because I've gone the other way. And that shit did not work. What's the worst that can happen? You already took everything I had. Are you going to drag me through the mud even more in court? What, because I took the initiative to seek help for myself so that I could be a better person and a better mother to my kids? Well, fuck off. Obviously, you're not looking at this through the right lens, as far as the courts. But that always is a risk. So anything that causes stress may trigger a breakdown. For someone who copes well with stress and has healthy management strategies, it may take a lot to lead to a mental health crisis. Of course, it also is possible that a person with good coping strategies may never experience a psychological breakdown, regardless of high levels of stress. On the other hand, someone who does not cope well may break down in the face of stress that seems minor to someone else. Okay, so a nervous breakdown can be caused by underlying anxiety and depression. And we are super, super overtime today. It talks about burnout syndrome and work-related breakdowns. So how about this? I will talk about the rest of this article next Friday. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in today. Our next show is going to be CPS current events on Monday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. That's 4 p.m. 4 p.m. Eastern time. And I will keep you guys updated on all the new legislation that is being passed in favor of us parents, which is really exciting. We're catching momentum. To end today, I want you guys to know we're all fucking crazy on some level. We're all crazy, okay? So if by being vulnerable with you guys today causes me to lose viewers or causes people to judge me, then so be it. But I hope that the people that are still listening are able to see a real human being, raw and honest and upfront about their struggles, which is what I'm doing. I see no need to filter anything with you guys. I see no need to hide anything from you guys. The whole point of this show is to be so raw with you guys about my struggles and my journey to finally finding peace and learning how to love myself, that, hopefully if you guys are struggling with the same thing, you can be inspired, and maybe learn some things, or at least, for fuck's sake, being able to relate to someone who is going through mental health issues. So I hope that what we talked about today was able to help you guys in some way. If you have any suggestions, please reach out to our producer, Grace. Please reach out to my supervisor, Georgette. If you would like to be on any of my shows, definitely reach out. You can reach me by email at amanda@vincentwdavis.com. So my email again is amanda@vincentwdavis.com. And don't forget, if you are in a mental health crisis, call the Suicide Hotline. If you can't call and talk to somebody, text 741-741. It is probably one of the best decisions I've made in a really long time. So I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend and enjoy the rest of your Friday. And thank you again for joining us on Fight With Me Fridays.